Hello and welcome back to my YouTube series on mastering JavaScript. In this video, we're going to cover one of the most important concepts in programming, control structures. Before we get started, let's quickly recap what we've covered in our previous videos. We've discussed the basics of JavaScript, including variables and data types. Now it's time to take our understanding to the next level and learn how to control the flow of our code with control structures. The first type of control structure we'll be discussing are conditional statements. These statements allow you to execute different blocks of code based on certain conditions. In JavaScript, there are four types of conditional statements: if else, if, and switch statements. Let's start with the simplest of them all, the if statement. The syntax of the if statement is as follows. In this example, we're checking if the number variable is greater than 0. If it is, we print a message to the console. Next, let's move on to the if-else statement. The if-else statement allows you to execute one block of code if the condition is true, and another block of code if the condition is false. The syntax of the if-else statement is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're checking if the number variable is greater than 0. If it is, we print a message saying that the number is positive. If it's not, we print a message saying that the number is not positive. Now let's move on to the if-else-if statement. The if-else-if statement allows you to test multiple conditions and execute different blocks of code based on the conditions. The syntax of the if-else-if statement is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're checking if the number variable is greater than 0. If it is, we print a message saying that the number is positive. If it's not, we check if the number is less than 0. If it is, we print a message saying that the number is negative. If both conditions are false, we print a message saying that the number is 0. Finally, let's move on to the switch statement. The switch statement is used when you have multiple conditions to check against a single variable. The syntax of the switch statement is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're using the switch statement to check the value of the day variable. Depending on its value, we print the corresponding day of the week. If the value is not between 1 and 7, we print an error message. Next, let's move on to loops. Loops allow you to execute a block of code repeatedly until a certain condition is met. In JavaScript, there are three types of loops: for, while, and do-while loops. Let's start with the for loop. The for loop is used when you know exactly how many times you want to execute the block of code. The syntax of the for loop is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're using the for loop to print the numbers 1 to 10 to the console. Next, let's move on to the while loop. The while loop is used when you don't know how many times you want to execute the block of code, but you know the condition that needs to be met. The syntax of the while loop is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're using the while loop to print the numbers 1 to 10 to the console. Note that we need to manually increment the value of I on each iteration. Finally, let's move on to the do-while loop. The do-while loop is similar to the while loop, but the condition is checked at the end of the loop, which means that the code inside the loop is always executed at least once. The syntax of the do-while loop is as follows. In this example, we're using the do-while loop to print the numbers 1 to 10 to the console. Note that the value of I is incremented before the condition is checked, which means that the loop will always execute at least once. Finally, let's move on to exception handling. Exception handling allows you to handle errors and unexpected events in your code. In JavaScript, you can use try-catch and throw statements to handle exceptions. The try-catch statement allows you to try a block of code and catch any errors that may occur. The syntax of the try-catch statement is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're trying to add 1 to a variable y that hasn't been defined. This will result in a reference error, which will be caught by the catch block and printed to the console. The throw statement allows you to create and throw your own errors. The syntax of the throw statement is as follows. Here's an example. In this example, we're defining a function that performs division, but it checks for the denominator to be 0. If it is, it throws an error. When we call the function with a denominator of 0, it throws the error, which is caught and printed to the console. That's it for our video on control structures in JavaScript. We've covered the basics of conditional statements, loops, and exception handling.